What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Allsmith. Somewhere along the way, we traded truth for trends. We started chasing hacks instead of habits and comfort instead of capacity. And now we're left wondering why we feel stuck, tired, and disconnected from our edge. Today is a return to ownership, to the quiet discipline that no one sees, but everyone can feel. Today's guest doesn't just study performance. He lived it, where pressure strips away identity and reveals what's tangibly real. This conversation isn't here to entertain you today. It's here to confront you, to remind you that the life that you say that you want is on the other side of the standards that you keep avoiding. So take a deep breath, lean in, turn up the volume just a little bit, and let's get to it. Today, I'd love to introduce Dr. Nick Barringer. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you, Bryce. I appreciate it. That was intense. Hopefully, we'll be entertaining too, though. I like it.
Maybe. I think we'll be at the intersection of entertainment and truth.
Yeah,
And
certainly.
something that I learned in marriage is that truth is the highest form of love. And in my pursuit to give love to our listeners, sometimes you got to have some hard conversations. And those hard conversations are not always around, hey, you're doing great, you're doing this. It's like, okay, what are the things that you're avoiding? What keeps you up at night? What are the truths that like we're not in an information like underload right now. Like most people have access to AI, they know, but they're not taking action consistently. And so I think what your story shares is not just the knowledge, but the experience and the tangible interaction with some of these things. So hopefully we can give some great takeaways to our listeners today.
Yes, certainly.
I'm excited to chop it up, man. Right now, what's kind of lighting your heart on fire? What's something that, like, when you look at the volatility of the world, like before we get into like a big conversation podcast, but like, look at the world, man. There's a lot of things going on. What's interesting to you? You're obviously very active on social media, sharing some things around different topics, around specifically nutrition and mindset and discipline based on your background. But what seems to be really interesting for you right now?
Nutrition is always interesting to me. It's what I fell in love with, my passion. I would be doing it for free. Luckily, I get paid so I can support my family. But it just the things that we thought we understood that we didn't. I mean, I've been a dietitian and we've changed our mind on eggs for like 5 years. And, I've always been a team whole eggs guy, but now it's come around, right? Like at one time where everybody's worried about eggs and cholesterol, there was a nice review paper that showed it might actually lower cholesterol. Um, a lot of these nutraceuticals, adaptogens, and compounds. I'm doing a deep dive on salidroside. I find it more fascinating for neuroprotective properties, cardioprotective properties, exercise performance, performance at altitude. The gut-brain connection, like that keeps growing and growing. In terms of probiotics and prebiotics and how you can manipulate your intake and how what you take in for your gut affects not only your strength, your mood, your performance. So all these topics, man, it excites me every day to kind of get up and see what's new in the world of science.
That's cool, man. Before you became Dr. Nick Barringer, you were Nick.
Still,
Who
Nick.
were you? Well, that's what's
Yeah, yeah.
interesting, right? Is like that's what intrigues me within Allsmith is like, who are you as a human? Like going back to your childhood and your experiences growing up, like what kind of funneled you towards eventually special forces and nutrition? Like what was it about nutrition in your life experiences that made you really realize like, whoa, this can be a game changer into the future of performance and longevity?
Yeah, again, I wasn't a great athlete, but I loved athletics, and so I really focused. Football and wrestling were my sports, and nutrition was a lever, and training that could. And I got lucky in high school in particular that we had a strength coach who came from Clemson. So you imagine, I mean, this is the '90s. So to have a collegiate strength coach at the high school level and named Scott Hines, and he mentored me and coached me. He took me to I mean, when I was in high school, I went to the National Strength and Conditioning Association conference. If that gives you any perspective, again, this is
Let's
like
go.
'97 in Las Vegas, and so to get that, I got my book signed by Fleck and Kramer, right, on programming, and so that trajectory put me on, set me up when I went to University of Georgia to work in the football weight room and again see what high performance was all about. And so I had that understanding, and then going into the military, I looked around, and again, remember for the audience listening, this is 2003, 2004, so quite some time ago. The fitness test was based off of just like calisthenics. It was still the push-ups, sit-ups, and 2 mile run, and that's what people did for training every day: push-ups,
Dr.
sit-ups, two
Nick,
mile
just so you
run.
know, that's
Yeah,
still what it is. It hasn't
yeah,
evolved. I work with a lot of like Navy SEALs and people in pursuit
yeah.
of becoming Navy SEALs. It hasn't changed. And like there's value to it, but then there's also this unique ideology around, and I have to do this in our facility now. Hey, there's training and there's testing. When
Right,
you're training, I need shoulder, hip, knee, and ankle in one line. We're gonna brace. We're gonna do a full fucking range of motion. When you're testing, you're gonna wear a baggy shirt. You're gonna sag your hips. You're gonna, minimize the elbow lockout, and you're gonna hope and pray you get a judge that's gonna like 1, 2, 3, 4, and like
right.
give you the reps. It's so interesting to me, man. Like the discrepancy and like the inflation of numbers based on bullshit reps. Why don't we just like depreciate this hierarchy of reps being the measurable for a better candidate for special forces and realize that like more is not better, better is better. And let's try to make the best candidate possible through high quality movement rather than this inflated numerical stance that they use within the military.
Well, to be fair, this has changed. So, within Special Operations Command, they have preservation of the force and fitness. So they have strength coaches at a lot of these units testing for this. And now, like with it was the Army Combat Fitness Test. Now it's the Army Fitness Test. They do the hand release push-ups. So you got to come down, you got to put your arms out, you do that, which to your acknowledgement, like when it was just kind of the standard push up, it wasn't always like the strict, by the book. There was a lot of poor movement, but now that you actually have to put your chest to the ground, extend your arms, and come up, it's a lot harder to fake the funk on that. So it
Sure.
has. I mean, it has evolved there. We're getting there incrementally, but that was what drove my passion, was what you're talking about. I saw that coming in the military, and especially from the fresh set of eyes of coming from a Division I collegiate football program that was University of Georgia. They had some pretty good football players. When I was there working in the weight room, I mean, it had Marcus Stroud and Richard Seymour, two of the greatest like defensive tackles in college football. I think I know Seymour's in the Hall of Fame because he went and played with the Patriots, et cetera. So it's like seeing how those guys, those high level guys trained, and then seeing the contrast in the military. It's like, okay, how can we get to be more like those individuals training wise, realizing we're not going to be the mutant athletes that they were.
Sure, man. What's the thing that makes them different? Like when you see the guys that are at the top of the top, like what makes them different? Is it genetics? Is it some sort of mentality? Or is it literally just like presence of mind, right? Like, hey, I'm here now. I'm going to give my best effort, and I don't care about compare and contrast or the outcome. I'm just going to win now.
Are you talking about for military?
No, specifically with the best athletes that you worked with, those two gentlemen that you
Oh.
just
I mean,
mentioned.
you say you're a high level at Georgia. What I saw in the weight room, I mean, there was a lot of like mutants, and I use that in the most lovingly term, in terms of a 300-pound guy who can dunk a basketball and run a sub 540. Like,
Yeah.
where else do they exist but in the NFL? and or at that high level of football. So there was a little of that. Now I will say this, and you'll appreciate this is there was a lot, like some of the best athletes I saw didn't make it.
Yeah.
Like we had a kid who was like an all world linebacker coming out of high school who just couldn't go to class, and you've never heard his name. But I can tell you, I watched him at practice at Georgia, and like the dude was a beast. I mean, he probably could have played at a much higher level, but he was undisciplined. He didn't study, and he didn't go to class. So you got to have a little bit of the mentality, but then the talent for that level of sport, just like I'm sure it was at basketball, it has to be there as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting, man. Like looking at like what the world gives notoriety towards, which is like, hey, performance. Hey, you had this many tackles. Your 40 time is this. Your weight and your measurables are this. But then you have like those guys that are like Julian Edelman that seemingly are just like, hey, I'm not going to cause any trouble. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to go to class. I'm going to know the playbook. I'm going to run really pristine routes and I'm going to show up. Versus over here, I'm incredibly talented. I'm not going to class. I'm not playing your game. I don't care how many, accolades or what the scholarship pays for as far as schooling. Like I'm here to play football. I'm not saying one's right or wrong because the world's changed a lot, especially based on the nil, based on what we've learned around higher education. I mean, some of these guys, NFL, dude, stands for not for long.
Yeah.
So it's like you could be the athletic guy that went to class and did all the things, and then you go to the NFL, you might get one contract and then you tear your ACL and you may never get to play again. Like the margin is that slim.
Oh yeah.
And so I don't know, man. Like originally, like younger me would have had buy-in around like, do your job, go to class, be responsible, do these things. But now the contrarian in me is like, okay, is that manipulative brainwashing? Are we going to class to learn things for the Industrial Revolution just to satisfy whatever monetization and then put ourselves into debt for most people? So that way you end up working a job, being a slave within the matrix to have to go pay off the debt later. I don't know. I feel like it's a pretty fair question modern day, especially post-COVID.
No, and I think those kids deserve the money because again, seeing what I saw then, and this was 99 to kind of 2000 2001, they were working a full time job and then some.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They couldn't do anything outside of football besides go to class.
And not to
And
mention their hormones are changing, right? Like
yeah,
they're not fully adults yet. They're still like on the tail end of like puberty. They're very like manipulatable. So whatever the coaches are saying is one thing. Then you got students and teachers that are kind of infiltrating that. Then you've got girls. You've got trying to like have the college experience. And now you throw in the nil. What are your thoughts on the nil and the name, image, and likeness and how that's
yeah.
getting monetized modern day?
I, again, I think the players deserve to get paid what they're worth, particularly to the point of the not for long. In that some of those players could sustain an injury in a bowl game and never have that shot, or go to the league and they're already beat up from their years in college. There's definitely smarter people out there who are suggesting some rules in that. It is kind of weird now to watch college football and be like, oh yeah, we don't have that player anymore. He transferred here. He transferred here. Players are on their like third transfer, their third college. That's hard to keep track of. I don't know if there's a better solution. But I certainly am a fan of the players getting paid what they're worth because that might be it, right? Like their college career, that might be it. They might not make it to the league. And so that university is making some sweet, sweet money off of their name, image, and likeness for years. I mean, if you look at, the revenue generated from just college football and, college basketball and those type of sports. So I'm definitely an advocate of those players getting paid what they're worth. Now, as far as should there be rules that, okay, if you transfer twice or, those sort of things, I'll leave that up to the experts.
Yeah, that's a fair analysis. I'll say I played my first year and a half of basketball at San Diego State, and then I later transferred to Cal State Northridge. And there was a lot of reasons that went into that. The biggest one was my father was diagnosed with cancer, and I wanted to be closer to home to help support my family. But I had to sit out based on the NCAA transfer rule at
Yeah.
that time. And so, I didn't lose a year of eligibility, but that was basically like a red shirt year that I was able to use. I think that's fair. And here's why. Life circumstance is going to take place. There's going to be consequences for decisions. The difficulty that I have associated with the modern day transfer portal is that there's no consequences, right? Like it just adheres to like swipe culture of like, oh, I've got this girlfriend, but she and I are having tension right now. So I'm just going to log into an app and I'm going to swipe and I'm going to have a new girl in 3 days. That's kind of what's going on in college sports. It's like, you know what? Me and the coach got into it. I've not gotten play time, in the last 3 games. I'm getting paid X, Y, and Z money from different sponsors. Screw it. I'm going to go to this university. Somebody's texting me behind the scenes. It's not a coach. It's not an assistant coach. It's somebody that's associated with the university. Maybe it's, a booster. Maybe it's a friend of a booster, however they mitigate the rules. And then all of a sudden you end up on a new team, a new nil deal in a new environment and this expectation to start over. But in my opinion, it's not really about the kid. It's about that coach thinking, I need to keep my job. I need to get wins and I need to satisfy expectations of the boosters associated with our school. Otherwise, I'm going to be out of a job and I can't provide for my family. It becomes this game of buyers and sellers and so much money going on that I don't know that I totally conceptualize it yet, but from an observational standpoint, as 2 people that have worked in strength and conditioning facilities at Division I universities, the loyalty's gone, the money is there, but it's a really hard field to have like the answer for.
Yeah, I don't know. I enjoy watching the product every Saturday. Those head coaches, I get it; they're under pressure, but they're compensated pretty nicely, and they got a pretty
Oh, yes,
sweet
they are.
they got a pretty sweet parachute. Most, some of them do. Some of them get paid more when they get fired. But so I don't know. It's just I feel like the genie's out of the bottle. You're gonna have a hard time putting it back. But to your point, but I've also seen it backfire in terms of there was kind of a famous situation with the Tennessee quarterback who thought they could get more money at a California team and they ended up getting less. So it's like the market's going to dictate
That was
your
the
value.
main quarterback for UCLA, right? Like he left
Yeah, yeah,
Tennessee. There was a lot of controversy there. They didn't even know if he was going to be the starting quarterback there. And then he had a tough year this last year. I grew up a UCLA fan, so I actually went and
yeah.
watched him a few times at the Rose Bowl this year. Actually, I think we went to 2 or 3 games, and yeah, he had a tough year, man. I mean, I don't know if that's specifically him, the offensive line.
Right.
I know they switched from Deshaun Foster as the head coach and then transitioned to an interim head coach. I think they're navigating that right now. But yeah, man, like there's this false perception of reality that the grass is always greener, but it's not always. You have to take into consideration a lot of different variables, and you may be the most talented quarterback on the planet, but if you don't have an offensive line that can keep you safe to give you time to make decisions, you're SOL, man.
Yep. Yep, certainly. And so there's a lot of that. And, that was probably a lot of lessons for some kids, to your point, is like, hey, the grass isn't always greener. Maybe it's better to kind of stay where I'm at. But again,
Sure.
I'm glad I'm not, in that world and I just get to watch it. And I'm glad my alma mater, Georgia, has a tremendous head coach in Kirby Smart who just puts a great product on the field year after
Sure.
year.
Yeah, he does do a great job. I'd be very curious. I was very fortunate. I want to say it was 3 years before he passed away. I got to go to John Wooden's house,
Hmm.
the winningest coach of all time from UCLA basketball, and I got to just like spend some time with him. And at that time, it was about value systems. It was about religious ideation. It was about some of the stories that he had told in some of his books around, hey, put your socks on the right way. Success is peace of mind, knowing that you did your best to become the best that you're capable of becoming. Do your job, know your role. Maybe your role isn't to get all the accolades and score all the points. Maybe it's to set great screens. Maybe it's to run the floor hard. Maybe it's to show up early. Maybe it's to have water ready for certain guys. And for basketball fans out there, I think we're observing that firsthand with DeAndre Ayton associated with the Lakers right now, where he's really like owning his role. And then as a byproduct, LeBron is also owning his role as the third fiddle and not trying to be the guy, which he's been for the last 20 plus years in the NBA. Yeah. But we're seeing Luka become the number one guy, Austin Reeves become the number two guy, and LeBron running the floor, playing great defense, contesting shots, things that don't always end up on a stat sheet, but are doing great things to win the game. And the reason why I bring these things up is not everything arrives on a stat sheet, man. Mm-hmm. Would the Warriors have had their dynasty without Draymond Green? I would argue no. Without those screens, without that energy and that raw, and without that combative tension that Draymond has on the floor, would Steph Curry and Klay Thompson be able to be what they are? I would argue no. And so there's something to be said that like every role is really valuable. And based on that, man, like you're somebody that's played a few different roles in your life. And so as we navigate this college sports element of your journey, how did you find your way into the Army and into this ideation where you became really focused on nutrition?
So, I started out an exercise science major, right? Like most strength and conditioning folks. And then I had to take a nutrition course. I had to. And I took this nutrition course and it was phenomenal. And I loved it so much. I was like, hey, can you major in this? And so certainly you could. And so I did that. And then while I was in college, 9/11 happened. I had family members who served. My father had been in the Army, the Navy. My brother is a Marine. And so that kind of event spoke to me just like it spoke to a lot of people. And so I joined Army. I was in Army ROTC there at the University of Georgia. And so that's what kind of led me, down this road, and then joining the military and going kind of the nutrition route and the human performance route. So that's kind of how I got there.
That's pretty cool. I'm going to ask you a hard question, man. Now knowing what we know about 9/11, what are your thoughts? Now knowing so many different things after that took place and some of the conspiracies that have floated to the surface, the anecdotal evidence that's been shared. I mean, I have a lot of friends that, pursue buds or becoming Navy SEALs based on the narrative that was shared around 9/11. Such an honorable pursuit. But what are your thoughts now based on your observation of loved ones, our understanding of U.S. politics, modern day, and some of the storytelling and manipulation utilized for profit that have kind of floated to the surface?
I wouldn't change any of my decisions that I made. I feel a lot of people that serve, and I definitely don't want to speak for other veterans,
Sure.
but having that conversation with them is a lot of it. It's kind of I think there was a scene in the movie Black Hawk Down that talks about this. Was like you serve for your friends and your people. To the guy or gal to the left or right of you, and that's they become your family, and that's really what it's about. I don't, I'm not going to get into any of the other things about that, but I have no regrets, and was proud to serve and play the small role that I got to play.
Yeah, sure. That's a really honorable pursuit, man. I know that's a question that ruffles some feathers, probably creates a internal physiological response for sure. But that's something that I'm very curious about, because I think you're really spot on, man, as far as like, why do we go do hard things? It's in the pursuit of love, of service, of protection, of a value system that's ingrained in our ideology. And it's not just about just that thing. It's about who you become in the process of doing that thing and the opportunities that you can provide for those after, right? Like Kobe talked about that in his retirement. One of the most successful things you can do is provide for the next generation. And I think what that showed is that the flag is worth fighting for. Whatever the narrative is, going to battle with our brothers and sisters and trying to be there for our country is a pretty honorable, valuable pursuit. And so I commend you for that. And I think you gave a really cool answer to a really hard question, man. Sorry to throw you under the bus right there.
No, no worries. No worries.
Let's jump into the nutrition, man. Like right now, I remember when my mom was alive, she was looking at like Women's Health and Reader's Digest. And Dr. Nick, there was so much conflicting information, right? Like breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Yeah. Let's have oatmeal. It's like, let's do these different things. Like Kellogg's was big in the 90s. I mean, you referenced the 90s a couple times where it was like low fat everything, chemical shitstorm. Yeah. And it was just like so many different narratives. Then that transitioned into like gluten-free everything. And now as we're like really getting into the nuts and bolts in this relationship between insulin and cortisol and better understanding true physiology and macronutrients and case dependency, where most nutrition answers are it depends based on your specific goals. It's so complex to understand, man. The amount of clients that I get to have these hard conversations with, they're like, Bryce, what do I do? Just give me the answer and I'll try to do it. But then you stop right there and you're like, okay, the compliance is the science. Will you actually be compliant with the protocol that I give you? And most people won't be. Yeah. And so when you're looking at nutrition, like it's become so complex that most people are struggling to do it right. You and I both know simple works, but simple requires responsibility. So as somebody that, you know, is a registered dietitian and works with some of the best, where do people start with this nutrition conversation?
To your point, right? It's not about information, it's about implementation. And I start every one of my talks with that and make people commit to, okay, we're going to change at least one thing by the end of this. Because I'm like, if I give you a bunch of information and you don't do anything, it's of no value. A lot of it is, you know, the simple things, again, meeting people where they're at. You know, sometimes I have a high performance client who's got everything dialed in and we're looking at those little things we can do to kind of get that extra 1%. But sometimes, you know, they can kind of be a train wreck, and it's like, all right, let's just have you drink enough water for the day, right? It could be as simple as that, you know, like, okay, let's focus on hydration. Once you get the hydration going, let's move on to the next thing. So typically I'll only focus on one, no more than 3 things. And once they get it going, and then move on to the next, and rather overwhelm them with a bunch of information. But you know, it's like, all right, let's get 3 colors on our plate, right? When we eat, let's get one more fruit this week. Let's get some more movement in. I love the concept of exercise snacks. Love it. Work with a lot of, you know, corporate clients because they're like, hey, I don't have any time. I'm like, all right, let's do, you know, 15 air squats every hour on the hour at your desk while you're standing there. You know, these little things to try to find solutions to that problem of implementation.
This little thing right here, it's pretty cool. One of our missions with Allsmith was to find affordable brands that we can partner with that seamlessly fit into people's day-to-day lifestyles. And the Kalo Current Ring absolutely does that. It's non-invasive. You can use it when you're doing any activity in life, and it keeps track of your data and helps with your steps, with enhancing your habits, with understanding your HRV, and most importantly for me and so many people in the world, keeping accountable with sleep. So check out the Current. That's pronounced Current, but spelled QRNT. And it's from my good friends and our new partner, Kalo. I love that, man. And we do the same thing with Allsmith, is microdosing movement into people's days. I love the every hour on the hour and then total volume accumulation at the end of the day. I'm sure some of these data trackers, whether it's for us, it's the Kalo and the current ring.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, it's the Whoop or the Garmin or whatever their data tracker is. But what I'm curious for you, man, like you took the leap. You're in the realm of entrepreneurship in some ways. And the buy-in around, hey, I'm just going to tell you to drink more water. Hey, I'm just going to tell you to put more colors on your plate. Or, hey, I'm going to have you do 15 air squats and 5 push-ups every hour on the hour. It seems so simple that it's hard to market.
Yeah.
And so if you were to put that on an Instagram post, people would be like, yeah, I know, I could have ChatGPT'd that, man, like super easy. We're not in an information issue. We're in will you take action with the information that you have? And most people aren't doing that. And so how do you create consistent buy-in to then monetize that consistently where you're running a business, where you're getting that traction month to month? Because like you could give that advice one time and somebody could be like, hey, thanks, bro. Cancel my credit card. Like, don't really want to work with you anymore, which I mean, in the health and wellness industry happens time and time again, where you're like, no. You don't realize like we're building this really awesome foundation and I'm keeping it as simple as possible because I know that's what you're capable of microdosing within your day to day. Then we're going to layer on top of that. We're going to build this 7-figure house. But most people don't have the patience for that anymore. They're like, cool, got the answer from the exercise physiologist and the doctor. Thanks, man. Like, I'm going to go do that and I'm going to get the answer. And then all of a sudden they're knocking on your door 3 years later and they're like, dude, I can't do it. I need the accountability. I need some help.
You nailed it, right? A lot of times it's about being that accountability partner. And then where I'm learning, all my schooling, they taught a lot about nutrition, learned a lot about nutrition. Didn't learn anything about sales or motivation or even coaching really. And so that's where I'm finding that I'm pulling from or looking from. You got to kind of sell people on the idea of doing these things. As far as getting people to commit, I mean, one thing like I do now, I'm not going to work with you unless you commit at least 6 months. I've done a few cases of like 3 months just because to your point, it's like, yeah, a one-time thing, it doesn't really do anything for either one of us. And so I require a commitment up front. I also like to leverage blood work. I'm a big fan of that because that's objective data. You can't fake the funk, on your dietary recall and tell me you're eating perfectly if your A1C is a 7.5, right? Something's going on. So leveraging those blood work is nice metrics to like kind of follow up to see, to movement, and also sometimes allows for real conversations in that, individuals aren't taking care of themselves and they know it, but then we get those numbers back and we look at their ApoB, their LDL, all these other factors, know kind of their family history. And I'm like, hey, you're going to have a heart attack. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, if you don't change these things. Right. And so it's
I like
a lot of that
honesty of having people take a peek under the hood.
Yeah.
Because if you ask people are great liars, man. Hey, how's your nutrition? Oh, it's good. Yeah, I feel pretty good. How's your sleep? Oh, it's pretty good. Okay, like, how's your thought clarity? Are you dealing with any brain fog? Yeah, it seems to be okay. Okay, like, how's your sex drive? Like, typically we know if you're horny, you're healthy. It seems to be pretty good. But how do you measure pretty good? And I think getting deeper, building that trust, building that safe space where their honesty and their vulnerability isn't going to be judged is a really valuable source of the sales process to help people realize, like, we need to track these things. Let's either use an app like MyFitnessPal or something to track macros, or let's create a detailed analog in a list. Maybe it's a shared Apple Note between you and your coach. Maybe it's something just for your personal anecdotal evidence to observe, hey, I thought I was eating good, but I realized, I had all these processed sugars on Monday. Then I did it again on Thursday. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I had 3 or more drinks with my buddies or with my friends or at a business meeting or event. Before you know it, you self-reflect and you look at that proof of concept, and my pretty good is actually pretty bad.
Yeah.
But it takes that hard conversation, right? Like some people are like, oh, you're just pointing out all my flaws. That it's like, that's not the goal. It's not to be, telling you everything that you're doing well. It's also not to tell you everything you're doing bad. It's to create total transparency of like, let's take the paintbrush, and rather than just painting a corner of the painting, let's paint the whole thing so we can be honest with each other. And to echo Jerry Maguire's agent in that movie, help me help you. The more inputs you get, the more outputs you can then deliver to serve people in their journey towards peak expression.
No, I love it. I mean, and that's why you mentioned the wearables. I love the wearable. I mean, I've been a huge advocate of using like the Aura Ring, and you can use the Whoop, you can use whatever, but it's because to your point, I asked somebody, hey Bryce, how did you sleep? Right? And you're like, oh yeah, fine. And then I look and it's like you're averaging 5 hours a night or 5 to 6 hours a night, which I had with one of my athletes. They were only sleeping when I first started working with them, and this has been years ago, like 5 to 6 hours a night, and they were a professional athlete, and it's like that's not that's not good. And so we were able to get it up to now 7 to 8, and they feel amazing. And they even said like, hey, this is probably one of kind of the levers that's keeping my career on track is sleep. And they didn't know because they never tracked it before.
Well, you don't know
And
what you don't know, right? And real
exactly.
quickly, like I want you to check this out. We just formed a partnership with Kalo, and
Okay.
they have this new ring called Current.
Current.
And my
Okay.
big
Right.
challenge with some of the other wearables is that they were invasive.
Mm.
What I love about this is their newest Current ring is slim. You can put a silicone covering on it, so you can do pull-ups, you can do all kinds of things, and it's not invasive in your day-to-day life. That's my big thing, is like have things seamlessly be a part of your day-to-day life so it's honest tracking.
Yes.
Because if you're watching your client or your patient, they're going to behave differently. But if they don't feel like you're watching, they're then all of a sudden going to have more honest behavior systems and habits over the course of time. So it's like really something that just fits like a glove, and they don't even realize it's there. And then before you know it, you get that data of, hey, like you want to lose weight, but you're only walking 5,000 steps a day. Let's double that. Let's try to get some extra movement in. Like, oh, now this helps with your case if you were thinking about getting a dog, right? Oh,
Yeah.
now you can, instead of taking the escalator or the elevator, now you can walk those steps at the airport. Now, like every morning after you finish your breakfast or in the evening when you finish your dinner, let's get a post walk. It doesn't need to be super fast. Let's get those steps in, some really gradual nasal breaths. Let's go from sympathetic, that fight or flight, which is where most people are spending their time these days. Let's get them parasympathetic into that rest and digest, marinate themselves in true presence, optimal breath work, getting it down from the chest, the scalenes, and the neck, where everybody's up here and high tensionists, on their computers or phones or driving. Pull the shoulders down and back and get them into belly breathing. That in and of itself will change so many lives. And you know this, there's that book, The Oxygen Advantage, and they talk a ton about nasal breathing. And if we can get more people understanding that based on the data that comes from the wearable, which is going to create that buy-in. Why are you so stressed? Why is your HRV not very good? Why is your step count not very high? What's going on with your sleep? All it is it's curating you down a better path, and it's true honesty rather than you and I calling people and like having to take metrics and like scold people for their lack of compliance.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I'll have to check that out because that's the biggest thing again with the wearables is, you're having that data, and then for remote coaching too, you're not there with them. They can be in New Jersey and I'm in Texas, and I can see, okay, did you have a drink last night because your HRV's off, or those sort of things. So
Sure.
it's really powerful.
Yeah, man. Calories still matter, dude, even if it's not sexy to say. And so
Yeah.
trends don't override physiology. And there's a lot of different things out there. I saw your post recently about this new supplement that they're putting into protein bars around manipulation of fat, and it's not
Oh
really
yeah,
digestible.
EPG. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I mean, at the end of the day, calories still matter, steps still matter, sleep time still matters. Let's dive into that a little bit, man. Like, how do you educate, motivate, and inspire people around calories in versus calories out, because it feels like such an old school ideology, but it still matters and simple works.
It does. I don't do a ton of calorie tracking. That's just not my approach. Because I just find people do it for so long, and then they kind of fall off the wagon. It's more of like, okay, what's your plate look like, right? This is what a plate looks like. And probably what I manipulate, where a lot of people's calories come from the most, is like carbohydrates, particularly. And so I'll portion off their plate and be like, all right, this is what you can eat if you just didn't do anything that day, or did your normal walk. This is what you can eat when you do a little more activity. And so it's just basically a simple tool of showing them, okay, on hard training days, I can increase my carbohydrates. On not hard training days, I can decrease it. And then this is where, my protein serving should look like. This is my fruits. This is my vegetables. Just because, although calories are great, and I have some people that'll do the MyFitnessPal religiously or whatever calorie tracker. A lot of folks, it's just too much, and so it's more like, all right, what should I be eating every day in terms of real food? What should that look like? And so that's
What's
that's
so
what I found to be
interesting to me
effective.
about that is I hear you and I
Yeah,
agree. What's so interesting to me is how the world and medicine and big pharma creates buy-in is around measurables.
yeah,
But then when you give people tools to measure, they don't want to measure.
yeah, yeah,
It's like a funny paradox within the health and nutrition experiment. And so people are like, how much do I eat? But when you create metaphorical analogies around like, hey, protein the size of your palm,
yeah,
and you create like this imagery for people, it's usually relatively repeatable. And it just goes to show that we're all operating as like the inner child in adult bodies. And it's
yeah,
funny because like when people give you directions, for example, they're like, hey, like, you're going to go to this street, make a right-hand turn, go to this street, make a left-hand turn. It's going to be, up on your left.
mm,
But then you have the other people that speak like, oh yeah, you're going to drive this way. When you get to the yellow school bus, you're going to make a U-turn. When you see the Taco Bell, you're going to make a left.
yeah,
And then when you get to, that local taco shop, you're going to make a right. And then when you see the Subway, it's going to be right next door to that. And it's like funny that like people hear that version of directions are like, oh my gosh, no way. That's like too much. It's like weird. But that's how they operate when it comes to nutrition.
yeah.
It's kind of like funny to hear your description, because I'm sure you work and have worked with a lot of different people, and you're realizing that the program that works is the one that they do. And so you're, like you said, meeting them where they're at with the appropriate communication strategy so that you can guide them towards the results that they desire.
Yeah, yeah, and I get it, and I'm that second person when it comes to navigating. I'm a landmark navigator, so I'm with you there as far as like I remember landmarks. I don't remember streets.
That's funny, man. You don't need a new diet. You need new standards. Your results reflect what you tolerate daily. How do you help your patients and your clients navigate their baseline tolerance when they're asking for a higher standard?
It gets back to the why, right? Like I feel like every coach we come back to that in terms of, okay, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to make this change? Do you want to play with your grandkids, right? Be around for them. Do you want to be more functional? Do you want to be, it's finding that individual's why they want to make the change, and making sure it's powerful and potent enough that you can, anchor to that, and that's what's going to pull them forward, versus
Mhm.
just focusing on the simple habits that's going to lead to the outcome. So that's really kind of what I start with, right? Is like looking at those factors of, okay, why do they really want to make the change, and really having that kind of be the catalyst to drive all those other little decisions, and
Sure.
then making sure those decisions are simple, like things that you can execute like daily, like breaking it down as far as I can to make it like there's just this one little thing you got to do each day. And then what I like to do is then layer on others versus kind of throw the kitchen sink at them.
Yeah, I think that's smart. What I'm curious about is how deep you go with the why, because we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems, right? And I think you see it like January, February, March every year. Everybody has like these sexy goals. They put them on social media. They talk to their friends about them. And it's this sexy collection of words that sounds like an honorable thing to pursue. But habits are boring. It's mastering the mundane. It's doing the next right thing. You're not getting a pat on the back or validation for hydrating in the morning and getting 5 to 10 minutes of natural sunlight, or your contrast therapy or your breath work. But they're things that move the needle in the right direction when done consistently over the course of time. And so what I'm curious around the why is I've done some really deep why discoveries myself. I've done it with Brian Chesty, the founder of Airbnb. I've done it with some different special warfare guys and the creators of the Honor Foundation out here in San Diego. Dr. Nick, it's painful. Like there's a lot of tears. Like you don't realize your why until you kind of draw a line down a center sheet of paper. Left side is your earliest memory. Right side is modern day. And then there's above the equator, which are maybe 5 to 10 things you've gone through that you're like, hey, these are relatively positive. They helped me understand me and move the needle to modern day. And then below the equator is like death of a loved one, really traumatic experiences that you're just like, I never want to go through that again. Based on the contrast between upper and lower, you share those experiences with a trusted confidant, family member, or partner. They take notes and they generate a theme. Oh, these are things that are important to Bryce. These are words that he uses a lot. These are categories or characteristics that seem to align well with his why. And then you create a why statement. To blank, so that blank. That's a quick elevator pitch as to how to do it. I've done it numerous times, and my why statement became to believe in others and create a safe space to allow their light to shine. Little did I know that all of my stories, both above and below the equator, are tattooed on me. And I was like, whoa, I didn't actually realize that. That's very interesting. And then here on my arm in Latin, it says, let your light shine. I didn't even know that. Like I was playing the surface level game and just kind of like tattooing things based on my generalized life experience. I don't know that most people know their why. I think they know their why. I think they say something that sounds sexy like goals so they can be like, I'm in pursuit of bettering myself. I want to lose some weight so I can play with my grandkids. But it's not real. It's a false perception of their reality. So what I'm curious about, like, how do you penetrate their heart and their soul where there's this vibrational alignment between head, heart, and soul, where it's real and not just, hey, this sounds good to say to my coach?
That's a tough question that I don't know if I have a great answer for. It's just through conversation and trust, right? That those individuals say, okay, this is um, why I'm doing it. Now you've got me thinking. I might take some notes from that and look back and think back to like my clients who were successful versus some who were not as successful. If maybe they weren't as honest with their why, and maybe that's what's driving it versus some of the other um, exterior reasons that you're given. But that's a great point. Is to get at the human and to get at that individual. I like to think that most people are honest in terms of why they're doing something, and so even though it might not be to the depth that you're mentioning, somewhere in that surface level there is a truth. To your point of like playing with their grandkids, there could be other factors and things like that. But I mean, I feel like that's a powerful motivator. Anybody, to kind of hang around to be there with the next generation. But
Yeah,
no,
man.
that's great. That's a great exercise. I like that. Where did you learn that exercise? What led you to do that?
Simon Sinek, he
Okay.
has his piece on Start With Why.
Hmm.
And I've just attended different seminars around the world where they utilized that piece. And, I think it was originally used as an icebreaker, and then it became going a little bit deeper to help people better understand themselves. It wasn't until I did that I better understood me. I was like, whoa, I'm making all these decisions based on my inner child who I'd never really spent time getting to know. And where I wanted to share a quick story with you, which I think is valuable for a lot of our audience, is I read this last night, man, and it like hit me like a ton of bricks. This young boy asks his grandfather, who's been married to his grandmother for 60 years, like, hey, how did you do it? And there's the cliche line of like, hey, we were from the generation of we didn't throw things away when they were broken. We worked on it. We fixed it. It's like, sure. But here's where it got interesting in his answer. He goes, I continued loving her as she changed. And then I paused and I was like, oh, interesting. Like maybe there's something to the ideology of upgrading your operating system or your OS. He goes, who I fell in love with in her mid-20s transitioned when she got to her 30s and her hormones started to change and she, had this pursuit and this desire for a family and kids. So I then had to love her differently. Then once we had kids, she was also a different woman. So I had to love her differently. I had to change in some ways. When we were young, she wanted the romance. As she got older, she wanted to be loved through the realm of respect. She wanted love in the realm of like meeting her where she's at, not so much the flowers and the extravagant vacations. It became, hey, let me do the laundry for you. Let me make the bed. You go have a night with your girlfriends. And then as the kids left and they became empty nesters, it was like, whoa, now she really wanted to rekindle kind of that romance because there was space where she didn't have to be a caretaker for the kids anymore. She wanted that same romance, but it was different because she was now perimenopausal. And hormones have shifted. And so communication strategy was different. It wasn't this sexually romantic thing. It was, I want to sexually connect with you ideologically and mentally and better understand, like, why are we here on this earth? Why, of all people, did we choose each other? And how have we made it work over all this time and building this life and these kids and this family? And then, them being in their late 60s now, it was like, how do we pay forward this wisdom that we've accumulated and get back to humor being our default emotion when the world is telling us to be overly serious and, pull from our retirement and understand healthcare so we don't have to end up in hospice and, be a pain in the ass to our kids later on? How do we make everything fun and playful like we did when we first got together? And I thought that was such a cool depiction of like, that is nutrition. That is fitness. Like we have to learn to upgrade our operating system and love ourselves and apply different things in different chapters. Like me being 35 now, it's way different than when I was training as a professional athlete at 25. It doesn't make it better or worse. It's just significantly different. And so taking that ideology and that concept to the headspace a little bit, how do you curate that experience? Because I'm sure you have people that are on different spectrums and different age demographics and wavelengths that you're coaching.
Yes, and honestly, I've enjoyed working with the more seasoned, individuals now, but
Mm.
because you got to take all those things in consideration, and it requires more nuance and perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? Versus maybe that 20-year-old or even that young coach who's like telling the mother of three, well, you have time, you're just making excuses, right? You need to do all this. They don't understand any of that or taking that into consideration. To your point about like menopause, I once started working with a group, that there was a lot of ladies in the group who were going through that, and I wasn't equipped to really speak about it, and so I had to do some research and learn that, okay, estrogen affects insulin sensitivity. So when you start losing estrogen, that affects how your body handles carbohydrates and all these other factors. And it really opened my eyes as a nutrition professional, because I'm like, wow, okay, this all makes sense about kind of what they're saying. I was able to eat this way one day, and it feels like the next I eat it, and I gain weight, or I feel this way. And so I had to do my research and then come back and say, okay, this is why, this is the physiological underlying, and then find other professionals that kind of dealt in this space and knew about them, and have conversations with them about how I can better serve those clients. So I really find it more rewarding to work with, kind of and I've worked with all, but like almost like the, not to put an age on it, but like a 40 and up crowd, just because they have more of those variables and are more appreciative of somebody who understands all those nuances of like, hey man, I got 3 kids, I got 4 kids, my time is precious. I have these other sort of challenges going on, and so you make a program to fit them versus making everybody fit your program.
I think also at that age, people have been kicked around a little bit. You think
Yeah.
about a rock that has kind of been in a river. It's been pushed by the current, bounced around different rocks, refined, changed color, tried different flavors, seen different fish. You know what I mean? Like it's been around the block a few times. And I think what's interesting is when you're young, everything almost works. And then you're like,
Yeah.
okay, let me hire a coach, and we'll refine some things, and I'll create a little bit of compliance, but it's relatively combative of like, oh well, I saw this other program over here. Why should I do this, Coach Nick? Like, and there's constant like, ugh. And then by the time people get to 40, they're like, I've tried so many different things. They probably all work, but I don't have the bandwidth to chase those programs anymore and play this swipe culture non-loyalty. I'm hiring you because I want you to help co-pilot my journey so I can be me. So I can be the best business person, the best parent, the best husband or mother or wife, and just really do the things that light my heart on fire. You get a little bit more clear on not just the why, but what you desire your life to look like. And I think that creates a lot more compliance and, like you said, appreciation, because they're like, whoa, I know what to do, but I need somebody to keep me accountable because it's so easy to eat that food off my kid's plate. It's so easy to be so tired after working my 8 to 12 hour shift to not go exercise. But I know I'm investing in this because I have skin in the game. Coach Nick's going to be, shooting me a message, and I want to make sure that I am holding myself to the standard of having my words and my actions be in alignment. And I think that sounds so simple, but when our words and our actions are in alignment, you have a beautiful life. But going back to our conversation around goals, people's words or their goal are typically, in my opinion, too high. I'm going to squat 500 pounds and I'm never going to touch a carb for 3 months. And then when that doesn't happen, like they exchange expectation for appreciation, and then they're pissed off and they want to blame. They go through the psychological warfare, and then they come to realize I aimed too high. I needed the low-hanging fruit to create the momentum that was actually consistent, sustainable across 365 days. What are your thoughts on supreme goal setting, and how do you bring people down to a low-hanging fruit?
I, I just, having that conversation, that honest conversation with them, because a lot of them, especially again, the more seasoned clients, this isn't their first rodeo. They've tried other things before and they failed. And so acknowledging that up front, and I even acknowledge up front with them that there's going to be a day you're not going to follow the program, that you're going to do that thing that you said you're not going to do. And
No,
it's
I'm not,
okay.
Coach Nick. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And then that day
It,
comes and you're like, dang it.
well, no, I mean, I tell them up front though, I'm like, that's okay. I fully expect it. It's called being human, right?
Mhm.
You're gonna have those days that you're off, and you're just gonna get back on the horse, and it's gonna be all right. Don't beat yourself up over it.
Yeah.
So I think, building that into the conversation of realizing that you're not gonna follow the program perfectly. You're gonna have some off days. But if you're, it's the old 80-20 rule. If
Sure.
80% of the time I can get you moving in the right direction, we're going to get the results. 20% of the time, I realize there's going to be some, uh, some other things going on there. But that's kind of the factor. And the challenge I run into sometimes is the mentality of kind of the all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
If you, because that's what I'm trying to combat, is that individual who's very type A in so many of their other areas of life, particularly work, and then they come and try to apply it to like nutrition and exercise, and they miss a day or they eat something, a meal they weren't supposed to eat, and they're just like, F it, I'm gonna, I'm gonna go to Dunkin' Donuts or whatever. That's the attitude I'm trying to combat. I'd be like, hey, it's okay. You had the Krispy Kreme light was on. I get it. Whatever. Just get right back on the horse that day, and we'll course correct, and it's no big deal. Don't beat yourself up
All or
over it.
nothing thinking is literally killing so many people's progress. And I think
Well,
the
it
perfectionism mindset is the easiest way to stay stuck.
it's romanticized. Like think about it.
Mhm.
Like how many people quote God, man, now his name slips. It's the famous story of like burn the boats,
Oh yeah.
and things like that.
Tony Robbins talks about if you want to take the island, burn the fucking boats is what he says.
Yeah, but I mean, it briefs well. It sounds sexy, but in practicality in life, you probably want to have a pressure release valve, right? Like burning the boats. There's probably a more effective way to do the thing. Now, there's certain scenarios, again, if maybe militarily or in sports or whatever, but for most, like the average person, I would say like the burn the boats mentality isn't going to get you where you need to go, right?
Yeah, I mean
There's got to
it's
be,
fear-based motivation. And
yeah,
I think it works for some people, like you said, that have that sports or that military analogy where fear actually works. It's a great motivator in some ways where it's like,
certainly,
whoa, if I'm going to take the island, there is no going back.
yeah,
But I think for most people, it's like they take the island for 2 days and they're like, well, I kind of want to go back to the boat for a second. I want to like see, that was kind of fun when I did that over there. We do this thing as humans where we romanticize what was, right? The good old days, or like, back in the day, it was super cool. Or, the way you and I kind of think about the 90s before technology, when it was like you're trying to find all your friends and it's the house that has the bikes, or playing N64, or thinking about like Pogs and Pokemon cards. Like I've been talking to a lot of my friends about some of those things and like they're all great. But like we've moved the needle quite a bit. And now we describe those things as being like overly awesome, but they also came with a lot of disappointment. Right? Like in order to hang out with your friends, you'd go all the way to their house, knock on their door,
yeah,
awkwardly talk to their parents, sort of ask if they wanted to come out and play. And then it was like you had to figure out the game. Like we dealt with a lot of boredom. Boredom seemingly doesn't really exist anymore because there's always one more thing to do. So it's like every space kind of gets accumulated by new stress, I guess. But like you said, it's easy to romanticize about the past. And most people are like, hey, I'm going to take the island. I want to make my life better. I'm going to move forward. But then they're like, the boat's still there. I could go kind of check out that thing real quick. And I think the goal is to like leave the boat there originally and then get it further from shore where it's like, okay, if you want to go to the boat, you got to swim there now.
mm-hmm.
And then now you're going to have to swim a little further. And then it's like, okay, if you actually want to evolve, you got to cut the cord on who you were in order to make space for who you want to be. But that takes time to graduate to that. And not everybody can just like flip the script because for military, if you're becoming special forces or a Navy SEAL and you get that title and that credence, or if you're in pursuit of high level sports or professional athlete, you're getting that contract. The incentive over here is a little bit more than like, oh yeah, I'm going to lose a couple pounds and have a couple extra abs.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and also realize too at those extreme levels, you can be highly successful in those endeavors and be an absolute horrible human in other aspects of your life.
100%.
Yeah,
Well said, man. Well said.
so, so,
Yeah, that's so
sometimes have a
true,
little
man. I mean, we
balance.
talk about that often on the show where, a lot of my life, we talk about the 6 F's: faith, family, fitness, finances, fun, and fashion. I just added the fashion one, which is still like, it's not quite like easy to say yet. But what's interesting about that and why I bring that to the table so frequently is that like for so long, like I had fitness. I didn't really have anything else, man. And like unlocking those doors has been relatively painful of like, whoa, I've not really spent a lot of time, energy, and emotion refining these different artistic pursuits in the human experience. And so being able to pay that experience forward to other people so they don't just like really curate one thing, but they can build all of the spokes in the wheel so that that tire seamlessly rolls in the direction that they want is a really interesting thought ideation because you're spot on, man. Like, there's the Tom Brady's of the world, which, you're all or nothing, super obsessive on one thing, and it works out. But for every Tom Brady, there's hundreds of thousands of other guys that are going all the eggs in one basket and then left disappointed on the other side.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, to get to the highest level, sometimes it takes that maniacal, focus, right?
Mm,
At the cost of at the other things, and so um, you got to decide kind of what you want to be, and you hit like the family piece of it, and for any of these pursuits, like for me personally, it would be like, all right, I want my family to be there when I'm there. I don't care if I climb the highest mountain and I look back and my family's gone. That's a problem. So I think acknowledging that and realizing that that those kind of for you those six F's or whatever for the individual is really important because otherwise you can focus on the task at hand and sometimes forget about other things that matter.
sure. For people that struggle making the most optimal decision when they're not being kind of policed or observed, they create this distance, I think, from the word discipline. Oh, discipline. It seems serious. It seems like you're being confined or put into a box for some people. And what I consistently try to share with people, and had to learn this myself, is that discipline isn't like a punishment. It's self-respect. I'm choosing this now to unlock doors of freedom later. And so every kept promise that we keep to ourselves brings that confidence to the surface a little bit around like I am who I say I am. And it builds that trust with yourself. How do you communicate that with people when they're just like, oh, you just keep telling me to be disciplined? They're kind of giving a little bit of pushback to that. But it's really like hand delivering a gift of like, hey, every time you exercise that discipline muscle, you now are building trust that it's there when you need it most.
Again, it comes back to focusing on kind of where they want to go and getting them there, and then realizing too is it, especially if they've tried this sort of thing before and it hasn't worked. Be like, okay, we know this doing what you did before doesn't work. Let's just trust the process, right? Some of those things. Let's do this, and give me a month, give me 3 months, give me 6 months, and if it doesn't work, then okay, you can try something else. We can do it your way. So just kind of that encouragement of go through the steps, work with me, and then we're going to get and you're going to see the results. The results are going to be there at the end. But right now, we just need to focus on those little kind of daily wins.
Yeah.
I think
It's an
just it's
interesting
just
thought
encouragement.
for sure because what comes to mind for me, I liked what you said of like, hey, like you tried your way, it didn't work, which is what led you to finding me or in this case you as a coach. But the other thing that's interesting is like people are constantly like chasing the carrot. They're in pursuit, right? Like I want more. I want these. I want these. And sometimes I think about it in this way. You're right. Maybe doing this thing doesn't get you to where you want to go. But I can guarantee not doing the thing
Right.
is definitely not going to get you to where you want to go. And you're definitely going to go backwards. And so that is a little bit of a fear-based motivation, right? Like, okay, maybe saying, if you want to take the island, burn the boats, isn't motivating. But it's like, okay, fine. Take the boat. You'll never stay on the island. You say you want this thing. If you want a mediocre life, go after it. That's what you had before. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So if your way is the way and that thing felt good and you did the thing, why are you here right now? You're craving assistance in upgrading the operating system. Why is it so hard for you to simply realize that, like, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always be what you've always been? Do you still want to be that? Or do you want to change?
No, it's a great question. Everybody needs to ask themselves that, probably when they look in the mirror and that's a challenge too with clients is having those difficult conversations sometimes of like, okay, because I know I've experienced and maybe um, I could be a better coach in that aspect, but I've experienced where you're working with a client, they're not hitting the goals that we set, and so it's like, okay, something's got to give if we're gonna get to where we need to go. And so you got to take a hard look at yourself and those workouts you're skipping, or the self-reported meals that you're saying you're eating aren't adding up to the outcome that we're looking at. That's an area I'm constantly learning as a coach, right?
Yeah, me
To
too,
get
man.
better at is to
I
find,
think I think
yeah,
marriage is teaching me this. I think business is teaching me this.
yeah,
I'm very fortunate to have people around me that honestly, man, it doesn't always feel good. They give me a lot of painful truths, and I deserve all of them. And fortunately, I'm in a season of extreme malleability where I'm like, okay, like I'm ready to upgrade. And for a long time, my stubborn ass wasn't. And so I think because I'm just in that season, I'm realizing that the painful truths and your willingness to receive constructive criticism are directly correlated to your growth as an individual. And I think if people are more willing to simply take that, be a sponge to whatever people's observation is, then go back into your reflective weight room, right? Like tinker with, you can't take everybody's advice, but you can weigh and measure like, okay, this is this person's perspective. This is my perspective. This is my wife's perspective, my team's perspective, the world's perspective. This is some of the feedback we've received on the various things that we're embarking on. Let's put it all up on the whiteboard. Let's let it all play ping pong. Let's paint the picture and let's sit with it. Let's see which ones are honest and real truth. Let's put it right in front of the headspace, right in front of the eyes. What does that word mean? How does it feel? Is that truth or was that just a one-off? Was it the day where I, gave in to the Dunkin' Donuts or the Krispy Kreme, or is that consistent behavior over the course of time and why it's holding me or, somebody else back? And I think what I'm saying there is that, like, for a lot of people, backtracking or going back to who you were is familiar and it's convenient. And I think convenience is quietly eroding resilience. So, like, the easy choices that you have now are hard consequences later. And a mentor, somebody that I crossed paths with recently, was like, hard, easy. I'm like, what? He's like, do the hard thing now. It makes it easier later. I was like, whoa, that's like the epitome of green lights, right? Like, do the thing that you don't want to do and it's going to unlock freedom later. Discipline equals freedom. Like, so many different thought leaders like use different ways, shapes, and forms to say the same thing. But I think at the end of the day, people have to realize, like, if I want to upgrade the operating system, something has to change. How do you get people to change, Dr. Nick?
that's deep. It's a lot of everything we've been talking about. It's leveraging the why. It's constantly, the follow up, being being that person that they don't want to let down. Being a coach. That's what I had to learn early on as a dietitian. I'll tell on myself. I always tell this story. When I first came in the military, I had all the overweight soldiers would come to me, right? Because you gotta maintain a certain body composition in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And my first class I got, Bryce, I was pumped. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna change the game. I'm gonna fix everybody. And I just gave them all this information, like all the nutrition information in my head. I just dumped on in this class. Had another class. I go back like a month later. I see all the same faces. Nobody lost weight. Nobody. It's like all repeat offenders or whatever. And so I kind of went back and I was like, oh crap, what am I doing wrong here? And I gave him a bunch of information, but I didn't inspire him. I didn't motivate him. So I looked at, when you don't make body composition in the military, you stay at that rank. You're what they call flagged. You can't get promoted. You can't go to schools. You have to stay in that. And so I calculated the average rank of those soldiers and then the pay difference that they would make if they were not flagged. And then when I started my next talk off, I was like, hey, who here is knowing they're paying $1,000 a month to come hear me speak or whatever, whatever that number was. And everybody's like, no, this class is free. And I'm like, no, 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 your decision is not free. You're costing yourself this much money. And I did the math on the board and said, now, the second question, who here wants to make that money back? Because I can teach you how to make that money back if you pay attention and you do what I'm going to tell you to do. Hands go up. And so I started giving them that information, same nutrition information, packaged differently, right? With that carrot at the end. Came back, half the faces were gone. And it was like, okay, what drove that group? I realized they were young. This is all like under the age of 23. It was like money. All right, a chance to make money. If I'm a PFC and I make specialist and get off this overweight program, I can do that. Now, for that more senior officers, it might be to play with their grandkids or whatever. But it was learning to adapt to each individual, right? And realizing that, and know that there's no cookie cutter approach that's going to get any one person to change.
Genius,
Well,
right?
it's
If you
trial
have
and error.
incentive, trial and error,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
led to you doing what you do now, which is meeting people where they're at, understanding the motivational factors, and if you have incentive, then you can predict behavior. And that's the thing that I think we see politically. We see it in the healthcare industry. We see it with nutrition, right? For a very long time, it was like, well, why should we have people eat real food when sick patients stay as patients? Then they'll pay their health insurance. Then they're going to be paying their copays, and then they'll stay within this cyclical system, a fear-based system. They'll have to go do their physical. They can do pap smears. They can do all these things, which, we could go down that rabbit hole as to how those things create additional sickness. And inevitably, it creates a huge money loop. Now what we're seeing is post-COVID, a little bit of defiance of that system. We're realizing that big pharma is funding a lot of these things that are quote unquote studies to have an agenda to steer people a certain way. Once again, as we described, going in alignment with what you just said, incentive. But now RFK is disrupting the system, man. You just saw the food pyramid change, which is directly correlative to your world. And then we see some people discussing, like we saw on The View with Whoopi Goldberg and her crew, basically criticizing RFK and saying, the least credentialed individual associated with healthcare in the world. But then somebody comes on and shows a picture of the previous leaders of the healthcare industry and health in general that are overweight, dealing with all kinds of symptoms, on all kinds of medications. And then you zoom over to RFK and you're like, okay, he's probably not spot on, probably has his own challenges in many ways, shapes, and forms. We all do. But he's in his 70s. He's doing strict pull-ups. He's advocating for people to eat real food. He wants people to move often at a slow pace. He wants people to be able to keep money in their pocket and make medications more affordable. Let's remove all political ideation from all of this, and let's think more about policy over politics. From a policy standpoint, I don't actually care where people land on the political spectrum around me. I care that they get to wake up in the morning pain-free. I care that they have a clear brain, that they have optimal hormones, that they can, remain horny, that they can eat real food, that they can sync with their natural circadian rhythm, and they can do all the things that light their heart on fire. And at the very least, hopefully mitigate the symptoms that are inevitably going to approach based on environmental toxins, age, microplastics, different issues with the toxicity in food and glyphosate and all the things that I could continue just, word vomiting. The point that I'm making is risk versus reward. Real food versus synthetic processed carbohydrates. You being a registered dietitian, you're probably getting every question underneath the sun. Now that the food pyramid has shifted and the narrative has changed and you're getting a lot of friction and tension within this, how are you creating buy-in? You briefly mentioned protein before. How are you creating buy-in around eat real food, portion size, and optimal nutrient density for your patients and your clients and the information you choose to put out?
Well, me personally, I mean, the story's never changed. I've always been about that. Much like you, I don't care about the political landscape. That's not what I play in. I look at the policies, and again, certainly there's aspects of the new dietary guidelines that people can debate and let them debate that. But the overall changes, just as you mentioned there, eat real food. some high quality protein with your meals, those sort of things. I think most nutrition professionals can get behind. And so with that, these are things that I've been encouraging. I never had clients that I would just have eat the minimal protein requirements that were the standard RDA before they were raised. I can't think of any dietitian that probably used them anyway. So now they are more in line in like what people are actually practicing, and encouraging, again, whole foods, less processed foods. I feel like is a great kind of foundational thing for most individuals to utilize. Now, I do have clients that have to eat processed foods because they're in arduous environments, or they're on the road, or they might have to go into that 7-Eleven and that's their meal given the situation. And with that, I say, okay, let's put processed foods on a spectrum. What does that look like? Is it this sort of bar with these ingredients versus that sort of bar? So I still give them tools to choose better processed foods, because you're going to eat them. It's going to happen. I mean, if you travel, or if you go to another country where you risk some serious gastrointestinal issues if you eat the local food, you're going to need to rely on processed foods. So how can you make better choices doing that? So it's using the whole spectrum of tools at your disposal to make the best decisions possible for you.
I hope we clip that, because that's one of the best depictions that I've heard to meet people where they're at, especially with travel, like allowing people to understand that it doesn't have to be all or nothing like we alluded to before, but better understanding that, like, hey, these ingredients are better than those ingredients. This macronutrient profile is going to give you the tools that you need to satisfy the requirements of your job, or your life, or your goals. I think that's phenomenal, because, dude, it's so hard to be perfect. And we could sit here on a high horse and talk about real food, but like, what is real food anymore, right? Unless it's a regenerative agriculture farm where every single ingredient that cow or that chicken is eating, like, you really don't know anymore, right? Like grain-fed, grass-finished, pasture-raised. There's all these big marketing terms that are really difficult to understand. Some are approved, some are not. Who's paying somebody behind the scenes to navigate, this facility versus that facility? It's a tough landscape, man. And then with Bill Gates' involvement, I mean, at Sprouts now, they're spraying a peel on the food. So like Paul Saladino talks about it all the time, like, hey, take your fruits and vegetables and kind of wash them off and then soak them in baking soda to kind of get some of the toxicity off of the fruits and vegetables before you consume them. What are your thoughts there, where, animals now are being vaccinated? There's things that are put into the food. There's dyes that are put onto, like salmon, for example, especially the farm-raised salmon. For people that are really trying to get into the nuts and bolts of like super clean eating, what advice do you give them, given that the higher ups are in power and control associated with what's going into these proteins and these vegetables?
Yeah, great point. But I will say this, for like the most people, like for instance, like the pesticides on fruits and vegetables, certainly wash them. I think that's great. We have our little wash. We do that with all of them. But
When you
sometimes I
say
get
wash, though, what do you wash them with? Are you using?
we have a spray. I'll have to pull it up. I can't think of the brand name, but we have
Okay.
like a cleaner that we use that's particularly
I'd
made
be
for.
very interested, because I hear some people say vinegar, some people say baking soda. Like,
You could use either. You could go with a base baking soda, or vinegar would work. You either create a really basic environment, to break it down, or a really acidic environment. Um, eh, but the bottom line is to get that off. But I had some people really stressing, this one group of clients I had, like, over that. And I found a paper, and I can send it to you, share it with you, that they looked at pesticide levels, and it's like mortality rates, and illness and sickness. And they found that actually individuals that had higher levels of pesticides in their blood, now there's a certain cutoff, there's definitely a threshold,
sure.
did better, had lower mortality, and it's because they
Interesting.
ate more fruits and vegetables. It
Yeah.
was just a product of eating more fruits. So why I tell them that
But
is
real
like, look,
quickly, like, look
yeah,
at that right there. You
yeah,
said the perfect, like, explanation there, where it's like the wrong person is going to correlate, hey, you'll
yeah,
have less symptoms with more pesticides in your system,
yeah,
versus, hey, high oxidate, high like nutrient density associated with vegetables, high, like things that are going to add value to your system. You're getting different colors, different nutrients for your gut microbiome, different things for your immune system. Like that has to be a variable that's part of the conversation. I'm not saying either one is everything, but
Right.
let's honestly call a spade a spade. And that's where I struggle with these conversations with dietary components and compounds where people are just like creating a narrative. It's like, just speak truth, please.
Yes, and I mean, I guess the whole thing with this is if you eat fruits and vegetables, you eat, lean meats when you can, those sort of things, high quality proteins, and you exercise, and that's it, right? Getting into the other factors of it, yes, there's literature that maybe this could move the needle one way or another, but the main like levers you're going to pull is that, and so that's kind of where I tend to focus with a lot of people, and even with like the meats. I'll bring up this like red meat. Like there's a spectrum that I don't think is discussed quite enough, in that when we say red meat, are we talking about, a hamburger at In and Out, or are we talking about venison? Are we talking about elk? Or some wild game. So what does that look like? Is it 80-20 or 95-10 in terms of the fat content? So also even considering the quality of the meat, and where it came from is a certain consideration. I would love to have wild caught salmon over farm raised salmon, but also realizing that I will say this, that if the best you can do or afford is farm caught, farm raised salmon, then that's also, that there's literature show that that's a benefit, that you're eating a fish that, even though it might have been fed corn instead of algae, it still has a certain amount of omega-3 fatty acid levels, and those beneficial things in it. Yeah, if I'm going to the store, I'm going to try to get some, Alaskan salmon. Love it. It's, love that beautiful color and that flavor. But also realize for some individuals that can be cost prohibitive. And that's the other exciting thing that is not getting discussed enough about these new dietary guidelines that I think will change is, you think about like, why is corn so pervasive in our, nutrition and our food systems? It's because it was subsidized, right? So it was cheap, and so that's why we have high fructose corn syrup and all those other factors. Now that we're encouraging people to eat these whole proteins, I expect the government's going to put some dollars behind it to help bring those prices down, to make it more affordable for individuals to eat these whole foods. And so that's a factor that I don't think's discussed enough, is the economic benefits of rearranging that food guide pyramid and putting those things up front. Is now that farmers and are going to be encouraged to produce those sort of foods for Americans, versus just kind of those crops like corn.
Sure. I want to agree with you so bad. And the optimist in me does, but then what I'm seeing in your depiction is that, okay, sure, now farmers, get a little bit more responsibility, but with responsibility comes a lot of pressure too, of now we have to play this game of mass production. I think what we're going to see is this transition from fat-free in the 90s to gluten-free everything, to now we're going to see protein in everything. I mean, you could go to Costco
Right.
and everything's like advertising protein now, but nobody's looking at the other ingredients.
Yeah.
And, you could have a chemical shitstorm that's incredibly calorically dense and 75,000 ingredients, but if it has 30 grams of protein, I'm getting it. And I think that's going to create psychological manipulation for people. And I think the pressure that we're going to see is it real protein or is it not? Right? We've seen stuff with Beyond Burger. Like if you actually test the quote unquote meat that's in Taco Bell, I guess it's 70% meat. I don't even want to know what the other 30% is. What I'm curious about is, yes, I'm all for getting more protein into people's systems, but I'm also fearful of like at the cost of what?
Yeah, and I can give you a little tool, and your listeners a little tool. I don't have a good visual right now for it, but if you flip over, if anybody listening to this, if you get a protein bar, great exercise to do, or anything that's advertising protein, flip it over, look at that nutrition label. And everybody knows to go and look at, okay, the protein in grams. Now look at the percent daily value. That is based off a 2,000 calorie diet and 50 grams of protein. So that percentage should add up, because what that RDA does, what they require, that, pardon me, the FDA requires for that percentage protein, is they look at the protein digestibility amino acid score. So is that protein able to be utilized, and then the quality of that protein, that it has all the essential amino acids. And what you'll notice in a lot of these protein bars, or even things that advertise protein, is the math won't math. When you look at, it'll say, okay, you've got 10 grams of protein, but then you look at the percent daily value, and it'll say 5%, which, or 3%. And so you'll calculate that out, and you'll be like, oh, that doesn't equal the 10 grams. So what happens there? Well, that's a lower quality protein. And so you can do that with any items that you get at. And I, teach in my classes for individuals to do that, is like, flip those over. If I was going to eat a protein bar, for example, I would want those numbers to match up. So if that protein bar had 50 grams, then it should say it gives me 100%. If it doesn't, if it's any less than that, then I know some of that is a low quality protein in there.
No, that's phenomenal. I appreciate that tool for our listeners. What protein bars do you like, man?
Um, I don't eat a lot of them. I don't. I tend to. I like meat, like different sticks. I
Chomps,
like Archer
baby.
Farms chomps. Yeah, my
Chomps are
kids
good.
use chomp. I tell you, now these are super pricey and super bougie, but man, if I can get my hands on some Maui Nui bars, like those things are that
Okay.
Access Hawaiian deer.
Yeah.
Um, an RX bar, it's not really a protein bar, but if I'm like exercise, just because it's a really simple ingredient,
Mhm.
I like that.
That's
There's a
one of
few
my
others.
greatest nutrition tools for people is like have things that you can pronounce the ingredients. If
Yeah,
it
yeah.
comes out of a bag or a box, it's probably not the best. Shop the perimeter of the grocery store. If it has an unlimited shelf life, probably not the best. These are some great tools to help people understand how to navigate some of that. And dude, I appreciate you navigating some of the tensionous conversations that I'm having with you because I mean, I wanna really create simple tools for people, but I also don't want to be avoidant or deflective of the hard conversations that are floating in the midst of people's headspace. I don't want to just sweep it under the rug and just be like, yeah, it's all good, because it's not. Like, people are genuinely getting sick. And what I want to pick your brain on real quickly is this whole concept of gluten. I don't even think it existed when I was a kid. And now it's like, I've got clients that have extreme allergies. They have digestive distress, like there's vomiting, they're sneezing. They're allergic to so many different things that didn't exist before. Is that because of pesticides? Is that environmental factors? Is it a combination of all of it? Like, what education do you provide for people? Because I'm sure you get people that are like, hey, I'm constantly bloated. I can't use the restroom. Like, how do you help people that are navigating some of these symptoms?
Well, I think to the overall, food sensitivity, one of the big things we've learned, and there's been quite a shift, and the example I'll use is nuts, right? Was with peanut allergies, was like, okay, avoid it, as kids, we keep them, and we found that was actually exacerbating it by not having that exposure at a young age, and then coming in later on and then having it. And so that actually increased it. So there could be a little of that going on. With gluten, it's tough. Um, in the military, celiac disease was one of the things that could get you kicked out. So I knew individuals with celiac disease who were hiding it or masking it to stay in. And I always thought it was silly that we couldn't just give them something that was gluten free, right? And so we figured out ways around it. So I think there is something there to pull on as far as more people being gluten sensitive. I don't know what's driving those numbers. Possibly just awareness, that more people are kind of talking about it, and are more aware of it. Um, I haven't seen any research or literature to point to one particular thing that is out there. Um, Goes back to, there's probably some gut microbiome stuff at play as well. That
Sure.
understanding is okay. What, what's your gut look like? Um, Antibiotic use. I mean
That's
that's a
huge.
big one, and that was one that I even discovered. I did my own kind of gut microbiome test because I'm a nerd, right? And one of the questions that was asked before I provided the sample was, how many cycles of antibiotics had you used? And I don't get sick that much, so I was like, oh, I think it's like one or two. And when I got my results back, it showed via my diversity that I had had several cycles of antibiotics, like greater than 10. And I was kind of shocked. And then it hit me every time we deployed to Afghanistan, we used something called doxycycline, which is antibiotic because it was anti-malarial, because there was a malaria threat in southern Afghanistan.
Mm.
And it was still showing up in my gut. It had been years since I deployed, but it was still showing up in my gut in my stool sample. So that opened my eyes to, okay, man, those antibiotic cycles, because I've known people that every time they get a sniffle, even though I don't encourage this to anybody, they take some antibiotics, right, to stave something off, and that's going to affect the gut, and that's going to affect your digestion, and that's going to affect possibly some of these things with bloating. So I don't know if it's a combination of medication, of environment, of some of the food, and some of these other factors. I don't know of anybody who has that answer, or if I've seen any literature that points to that one thing. It could be, a combination of things to include maybe the genetics of that individual.
Today was fun, man. It was really cool
Yeah.
to kind of get into the weeds a little bit. I hope we didn't leave people lost in the sauce where they're stepping over hundreds to pick up pennies. I will say we've had some gut microbiome experts on, and something that's really interesting to me, Dr. Nick, is the skin and how that's one of your largest portions of gut microbiome. You see Amish people not really getting sick that often. They choose not to get vaccinated, and they go more of a holistic approach. I mean, this human body is just absolutely incredible in its ability to rise to the occasion, to manage stress. And, obviously there's all kinds of toxins and things out there, but something that stands out to me is parabens, fragrances, different types of aluminum and metal toxicity in deodorants, lotions, especially during COVID, the constant washing of the hands. Back in the day, people were getting their hands in dirt and soil, and that was, obviously penetrating the skin in some capacity. The demonizing of the sun over the last like 3 decades, and not realizing how valuable vitamin D is and microdosing that over the course of time. The impact of like you said, high fructose corn syrup, seed oils, things that are used for mass production and preservation for shelf life and monetization around food. All of those things impact your gut microbiome. And we had the founder of Seed Symbiotic on the show a couple times, and he talked directly to those things and how also a lot of this supplement culture is designed to have the supplements that you take that don't actually make it to your large intestine because it doesn't have that prebiotic outer capsule that can survive the acidity to then make it to your digestive tract. So that's something to take into consideration as well. I think if we were to summarize today, and I want to pick your brain on this, primal living seems to be pretty cool. Eat real food. The CrossFit prescription's pretty cool. Like, eat real food, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, and no sugar. Trying your best to get things from natural sources to the best of your ability. Obviously paying attention to, like we discussed previously, nuts and seeds. Peanuts, by the way, are a legume. They're not a nut, which is funny because it's called a peanut. And these are things that I know you know, but just trying to create easy takeaways for people today. If you were to maybe give in 2 or 3 sentences some nuts and bolts for people to take away from our conversation today and what they can do to better optimize their nutrition, what would you say?
Well, one, I would start off with hydration. Everybody listening to this,
Huge.
half your body weight. Take half your body weight and drink that in ounces per day, because that's the foundation, in terms of how your body responds to stress, and thermal regulation and cognition and all those other factors that gets overlooked. And then a lot of the principles you mentioned right there: fruits and vegetables. I want at least 3 colors on my plate every time I eat. Carbohydrates, particularly for individuals, we'll say 35 and up, maybe 40 is you got to respect them. If you're going to have more carbohydrates, you got to earn them. What did you do to earn them? If you're going to have a cup of rice, did you do anything to earn that, or did you just want that? So kind of looking at that, lean sources of protein, get some fatty fish a few times a week, and enjoy your whole eggs, particularly the egg yolk, because that's where you're getting the choline, the vitamins and stuff. Don't do the just egg white thing. And then exercise and have fun. That would be it.
I love that,
Did I
man.
miss anything? I don't
No,
know.
I think you're pretty spot on there. Just we had Dr. Sean Baker on the show, and he's the author of the Carnivore Diet, and he's always advocated for the whole egg. At what point did cholesterol start getting demonized? Like, where did you notice that? And we're seeing now that people that typically live the longest have the highest cholesterol. It's a unique correlation that we're seeing. And obviously, the egg yolk having so much nutrient density, it's confusing to people in the baby boomer generation. And I think a little bit easier to digest for the younger generation. How have you navigated that conversation?
Well, so it was in my nutrition training at one point. It was okay. You got to have 300 milligrams of cholesterol or less per day, and that has been lifted now because we realize saturated fat drives cholesterol more. I mean, I think to my knowledge and every his knowledge, you played in the space, is probably a lot of the Ansel Keys studies, looking at fat that drove that line of thinking, which has now been revisited. You mentioned Dr. Sean Baker. He's somebody I would love to meet because I am fascinated. Because is he in his 60s?
Yeah. He's in his 60s. He has numerous world records on the Concept 2 rower. Big ribeye fan, super fun to talk to, and has so many different case studies and anecdotal evidence based on the carnivore diet. And then he started, I believe it's called Brevero, Rivero. And they're doing some really cool things in the health and wellness space that are a little bit contrarian and go against the grain, but he's getting great results. And it's very brave to take on big pharma the way he is.
I am not a, I don't practice carnivore. But it is one of those things that I think you got to look at. Is your carnivore again eating just in and out burgers, or doing it like what I see him
Quality matters. And I
do,
think
or
you're
the
pointing out
quality,
to
right?
there's a very big study, and Sean's the one that told me about this. They compared and contrasted, certain people that had red meat versus people that were on a vegan diet. But the people that had red meat were having hamburgers and hot dogs and the
Right.
bread and the processed things associated with that. It wasn't the venison, the grass-fed ribeye, the skirt steaks, the things that were coming from great sources full of nutrient density and the appropriate omegas in their profile to add that like satiety and nutrient density, which is also going to mitigate how much you consume, which I think portion size has to be at least a part of the conversation. And that's my challenge with these studies, man. The modern day consumer hears doctor in front of somebody's name or according to this study, and it creates a belief system and trust. But now we have to be really careful of that. And so as we finish things up today, what advice do you give to people as to how they create trust with what they're consuming on their day to day with their nutrition?
I would say the principles have stood the test of time. Now I know this will go against the carnivore. I mean, eating fruits and vegetables. I haven't seen anybody get any studies yet that show somebody gets poisoned by eating too much broccoli. I haven't seen that. If it's out there, if a listener has that paper, feel free to send it my way. Um, getting those kind of basic nutrition principles that we talked about, as far as getting the high quality protein, fruits and vegetables, movement, the appropriate amount of fluids, and then trusted sources. A lot of it is looking at peer reviewed literature, like you said, and but taking in its totality, looking in the concept, and realize that science is changing too, that it will evolve, that there will be stuff that we didn't know in emerging science, and then understanding kind of your own body, and what works for you, and what doesn't. I was uh, lucky enough, when I was at A&M, there was a study going on with carbohydrate intake where they controlled for sex, they controlled for activity, they controlled for all the variables you can control in a human, outside of putting them in a cage like a rat and not letting them leave. But they controlled for all those variables. They fed them the same amount of carbohydrates, and they found that even with that, individuals had really different responses to those carbohydrates. Some people's blood glucose shot up, some people's didn't shoot up as much. And so that study alone showed me that, yeah, there's a lot going on with our genetics and how it interacts with the food we eat that we don't think about. So there's a little nuance there as well. And eventually we'll get that figured out. I don't think anybody's cracked that code yet. But a lot of it is just, yeah, is reading, learning, and finding out what works for you, and find some trusted sources there. I follow Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. I follow Dr. Abby Ryan Smith. Some other people, some of those nutrition peps. Grant Tinsley out of Texas Tech. Dr. Mike Ormsby. There's a lot of different, kind of people out there in that world who play in the space that I follow that are doing this sort of research that, looks at these factors.
And a common theme that I see in all of them that seemingly will steer people in the right direction: meats and vegetables, man. Hydration, getting some quality hydration, movement, lift heavy things, sprint every once in a while. I think our man Mark Sisson hit the nail on the head. It's living the test of time that these various attributes from primal living are serving people, and standing up against all the nuance and the things that are becoming clickbait, whether the pyramid is this or that, or this expert said this, or that influencer said that. Meats and vegetables seem to do the body good. And today was fun, man. I appreciate you chopping it up and being able to play ping pong on a fiery, aggressive, tensionous. I push some things your way based on what we're seeing in the nutrition landscape and in the mindset and performance landscape. So I appreciate you being willing to have hard conversations, because I think the hard conversations are the things that are moving the needle in the right direction.
Certainly, Bryce, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and hopefully the listeners got something out of all the things we covered today, because we covered quite a bit.
For sure. Dr. Nick Barringer, ladies and gentlemen, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram. So it's nickbarringer.phd.rdn. I'm also on LinkedIn, Dr. Nick Barringer, and then my website, drnickbarringer.com.
Very cool. And we'll include all those things in the show notes as well. Today was fun. Guys, if you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Nick Barringer, please rate, review, subscribe. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Till next time. Thanks, man.
Thank you.